Good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of Charles Sturt EdX 2023. We have had a great first day, and we're now very much looking forward to hearing from the amazing Associate Professor Guy Curtis from the University of Western Australia. We thank Guy for joining us. I've just got a few bits of administration to deal with first. So if you'll just hang on while I see if I can get that sorted. So the first thing is, of course, that we're recording, and obviously that message has gone out to you all who have joined, so thank you for that. Please keep your microphones off while the keynote is going, and just unmute if you are asking questions in the Q&A at the end. We'll also keep an eye out for questions in the chat at the end. I would like now to move to the acknowledgement of country before I introduce Guy. So the Division of Learning and Teaching acknowledges the transformative effect of education. Our impact leads to ever-improving educational outcomes, inspiring our students to create a world worth living in. We recognise the inclusive nature of First Nations educational practices and the innovative strategies that have ensured the continuing diversity of lands, waters, and peoples for millennia. We also acknowledge that in our practice we are guided by the elders, past and present, of the country in which our campuses live, the Wiradjuri, the Biripi, the Gundungurra, and the Ngunnawal people. In the spirit of Yindamara Winangana, we recognise the depth of First Nations ways of being, ways of knowing, and ways of doing, inspiring our commitment in supporting staff and students in the wisdom of respectfully knowing how to live well in a world worth living in. And now let me tell you a little bit about Associate Professor Guy Curtis. So let me just find that we have beautiful notes and a bio here. So here we go. I worked with Associate Professor Guy Curtis at Murdoch University when we were young, but now Associate Professor Guy Curtis is at the School of Psychological Science at the University of Western Australia. He is working in the School of Psychological Science and has over 19 years of experience actively researching academic integrity. He has published over 50 journal articles, including research charting trends and prevalence in academic misconduct and the predictors of academic misconduct. The keynote presentation today will discuss recent trends in academic integrity, such as the rise in the use of ChatGPT, and highlight the ways we might work to minimise academic misconduct. It is with this welcome and this joy that I hand over to Associate Professor Guy Curtis.
Thanks, Lisa. Now, first thing to check is the technicalities. Can you hear me okay? Thumbs up from anyone who's on screen. Yep, or I see nods. Fantastic. So the next thing is for me to share my presentation, and hopefully that can be seen okay. Great, and then I'll put that onto a show view. Okay, now you seem to have the view that, now are you looking at my notes view at this point, Lisa, or are you looking at the full screen?
We've got the 2 slides on, so that it would have notes. It would have notes.
Notes view. Okay, yeah. So I think I can
display settings. Yeah.
Yep. Go to another view.
That's the one.
And have you now got the full screen version?
Thank you very much, Guy.
Fantastic. It's amazing when you can work out the technicalities like that. Okay, so I'll get started. Thank you for inviting me to present to the Charles Sturt EdX conference. It's a great honour and a pleasure to be here, and particular thanks to Professor Lisa Carey for inviting me. The title for my presentation is Promote, Prevent and Prosecute: 3 distinct approaches to academic integrity and academic misconduct for 3 distinct groups of students. And in this presentation, I'm going to make the argument that students' approaches to academic integrity and academic misconduct fall essentially into 3 categories, which make 3 categories of students. These 3 categories of students are not 3 categories of the same size. One group's pretty big, one group's pretty small, and then there's another group in somewhere in the middle. Now, because there are 3 different groups of students, my argument will be that we need to do 3 different things to promote academic integrity and reduce academic misconduct among these 3 groups of students. I have tried to time this so that we've got a good amount of time for Q&A at the end, but I'll just get into it and we'll go from there. So the place that I'm presenting from is the University of West Australia, as Lisa mentioned, and the University of West Australia is situated on the lands of the Wadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and I like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. They continue to practice their values, languages, beliefs and knowledge. Sorry, this seems to be advancing without my say-so. I might need to see what I can do about that. Sorry, it's decided to time itself. Okay, I'll go back and just hopefully that won't be too distracting when that happens. Okay, I'd also like to pay my respects to any Indigenous people who are watching this presentation and the traditional owners of the lands on which you're viewing this presentation. Okay, now having acknowledged the country, their traditional owners, I also want to particularly acknowledge collaborators that I've worked with over the past particularly 4 or 5 years on research on academic integrity and academic misconduct. My background is psychology, but people I have worked with in this area include people whose specializations are in education, criminology, economics, assessment, technology, and all sorts of other things. And that diversity of perspectives on academic integrity and academic misconduct has really informed my thinking. I hope my contributions have informed the thinking of the people that I've worked with. And working with other people has been so beneficial to developing a program of research, to exploring different ideas and different perspectives. Now, within this presentation, I'm going to talk a lot about 2 areas that are not my areas of expertise: economics and criminology. I'm going to particularly highlight the work of the person looming large first, Professor Dan Rigby from the University of Manchester. Dan's an economist, and Dan did some work a few years back on what circumstances, what conditions would entice students to buy assignments written by other people to submit as their own from an economic kind of choice perspective. And we've done some recent work together, which I'll talk about in this presentation. The other looming large on the left now is Joe Clare, who's here at the University of Western Australia with me, except he's not with me in psychology. He's with me at this university in the School of Law. Joe is a criminologist, and the criminology perspective I've found really useful in understanding academic misconduct. Criminology is about why people engage in crimes, and crimes are arbitrarily defined by laws, but what they typically capture is bad behavior or unethical behavior. And that bad behavior or unethical behavior and why people do it and why people might not do it applies really well in the space of academic misconduct. So the theories, the strategies that come out of criminology work really well when we start thinking about academic misconduct. And then down the bottom with big glasses looming up here is Kiata Rundle, who was a PhD student that Joe and I supervised. Kiata did a degree in psychology and criminology and took her combined interests with ours to do a lot of work on why students do and don't cheat, which again has informed my thinking. Now, Lisa did mention that I'm going to talk about ChatGPT and artificial intelligence, and I'm going to essentially bookend this talk with mentioning of this topic. ChatGPT has highlighted a problem in academia, which is the problem of students cheating in their educational assessments. Importantly, it's not a new problem. It's a problem for which we, in many ways, have solutions, but ChatGPT has presented some new challenges. For a long time, and particularly with contract cheating, we think it's plausible to deny that contract cheating was even going on for many universities. They could say, well, we're not seeing it because we're not catching it, so we probably don't think it's happening very much. But in the background, lots of researchers for a few years now have been saying, actually, there's a fair bit of this going on, and it's actually fairly implausible to deny that this cheating is occurring. Now, the launch of ChatGPT has meant that denying the existence of the potential for widespread cheating is a fairly implausible thing for higher education institutions to do. And we need to be aware that now that we know cheating is happening a bit and can happen a bit, that we should probably be doing something about it. Now, as I said, I'm from psychology. My perspective of psychology and one of my key areas is what's called individual differences psychology. Now, thanks to ChatGPT, I have a nice definition of individual differences psychology that I can quote verbatim, and I think I'm doing the right thing with ChatGPT of putting the output in inverted commas and putting a reference on it. And I believe that's the best way to cite anything that comes from ChatGPT. Essentially, individual differences psychology is a subfield of psychology that focuses on the study of how and why individuals differ from one another in various aspects of behavior, cognition, personality, and psychological traits. The main psychological individual differences that people talk about most of the time are things like intelligence and personality. And the thing that personality does as an individual difference is it means that in some situations, some people do different things to other people. So you might find situations where everyone sits quietly in a lecture theatre, but then when you get a chance to ask questions, some people will be brave and extroverted and outgoing and ask questions, and some people will still remain shy and sit there quietly. So individual differences are important to what people do, regardless of the situation in many cases. Now, in the area of academic integrity and academic misconduct research, one of the key researchers in the late 80s, early 90s, Donald McCabe, made the argument that individual differences weren't really worth knowing about. He said with Treviño that although the individual differences approach helps us to understand individuals' predispositions to cheat, the findings are not particularly useful for university administrators who are searching for effective institutional responses to academic dishonesty. Now, I think that position isn't well founded, and more recently, Joe Clare and I have argued that because different students have different reasons for engaging and not engaging in academic misconduct, administrators have to consider that there isn't a one-size-fits-all prevention strategy that will work for all students. Students aren't all the same, so we can't just do the one thing to reduce academic misconduct and promote academic integrity. And that is leading me very nicely to the point that I think there are three distinct groups of students, and we need to do different things for these three distinct groups of students. So in this presentation, my argument is that we have three distinct groups of students that I will call, for lack of better names, non-cheaters, the cheat curious, and the likely cheats. I know cheating can sometimes be considered a bit of a pejorative term in higher education. You know, oh, the students don't really want to do the wrong thing. Look, sometimes there are some people who are enrolled in higher education institutions, and I advisedly use the expression enrolled in higher education institutions rather than calling them students, who are there trying to do whatever they can to get the qualification or to remain enrolled, maybe for visa reasons or something like that, where following the rules of good academic practice and assessment is really not what they're trying to do, not their aim. Okay, so I have, over the past couple of years, settled on this idea that I think there are these three distinct groups of students, but I'm going to tell you about what originally got me thinking that these three distinct groups exist. And it's a combination of research findings from Dan Rigby, who I've mentioned already, and Tracy Brettag and her colleagues in a big survey of Australian university students in contract cheating. So a lot of the cheating research that I'm going to talk about for the next little while is particularly focused on contract cheating. And contract cheating, for people who are less familiar with that term, is outsourcing assignments to other people to write for the student, and the student submitting the assignment that was written by someone else. And particularly, a lot of that focus has been on commercial contract cheating. So this is where students pay for buy assignments from other people. Okay, so in about 2019, I made the little graph on the left. This little graph on the left is an estimation based on 2 studies of how many students are likely to engage in contract cheating, how many it might think about it, and how many probably won't. Now, the information in this graph came from 2 sources. First of all, Dan Rigby's first study on students' intention to buy assignments. He and his colleagues presented students with a bunch of scenarios that said, here is an assignment you could buy. You would get this mark, it would cost you this much. Here's your risk of getting caught. Here's the penalty that you would face if you were caught. Would you buy this assignment? Or would you buy this alternative assignment where the price is different, the mark is different, the chance of being caught is different, and so on? So that choice buying or discrete choice task, what they found in giving this to students was that half of the students always said they would never buy an assignment. Okay, so from that, I came up with the estimate that essentially half of students probably won't buy an assignment or won't cheat. But that meant that the rest might, at least some of the time, do so. But then that left the question of how many actually would or do buy assignments and submit them as their own. And from Tracy Brettag's big survey of 14,000 Australian students, they found around about 2% of students said that they had bought assignments, they were written by someone else that they had paid for, that the students submitted as their own. So that left me thinking, okay, well, there's about that 2% who would buy. There was also outsourcing in that study. That left a good percentage of students who might think about buying, and then at least the biggest chunk that wouldn't. But that also got me thinking, if only 2% of students are buying assignments that are written by someone else, why is it that 98% of students are not buying assignments that are written by someone else and submitting them as their own? That question is interesting in the context that a lot of contract cheating is not caught or detected, or at least certainly wasn't a few years ago. And essentially what we can think with a lot of it not being detected is, well, if it's not detected, you could get away with it. Why wouldn't you? Why would 98% of students still not do this? And so working with Joe Clare and Kiara Rundle with that criminology perspective, one of the things we thought about is the idea of people needing to have reasons for their choices to cheat and their choices to not cheat. The rational choice perspective on crime and criminology informed that thinking. So we conducted a survey of over 1,300 students, and most of them had not engaged in contract cheating. Again, around about 2% had. But within that, we thought about possible reasons why students might not cheat. And we got that from the literature, we got that from brainstorming, we got that from a focus group, and we asked students in a survey, are these the reasons why you don't cheat? Is it because of lack of opportunity? Is it because you're afraid of being detected and punished? Is it because of, mistrust in the writers to do a good job for you? Is it because you're motivated to learn? Do you manage your time well, and as a consequence, you're never put in a position where you feel like you need to cheat? Do you not cheat because you think it's immoral? Do you not cheat because you think it's not normative? That is, you don't think most other students are cheating. We made a survey trying to capture all these reasons, and we gave that survey, as I said, to these nearly 1,300 students who said that they hadn't engaged in contract cheating. What we found in this survey was that these reasons for not engaging in contract cheating basically fell into 5 main categories. One was motivation for learning. And second was morality and norms. And these were the two most endorsed reasons for not engaging in contract cheating. So the students were mostly saying the reasons they don't cheat is because they're at university to learn. So obviously it's undermining their study, or they believe that it is not moral to engage in contract cheating, or most other people aren't doing it. The next most endorsed reason for not cheating was fear of detection and punishment, and that is keeps moving by itself. Students saying that they were not cheating because they were worried about being caught, or the consequences for that. In addition, not so much endorsed, students were saying that they didn't trust other people to write for them, or they felt that they could do the assignment themselves. And finally, the least endorsed reason for not cheating was lack of opportunity. So that is, some students were saying, look, I could cheat, but but I haven't had the chance to because the assignment hasn't really been cheatable. It's been something I couldn't find someone to write for, or something like that. Now, my perspective as an individual differences psychologist was that individual differences might be related to these reasons. Different students would probably have different reasons for not cheating, and that ultimately is important for reasons that I will get into in a little bit. So in this study, as well as asking students their reasons for not cheating, we also asked them about their psychological traits, and we focused on three categories of psychological traits in particular: self-control, which is the ability to resist temptation; grit, which is related to educational outcomes. It's essentially a combination of perseverance of effort and having consistent interests in what you're doing. And then this interesting set of psychological traits called the dark triad. Now, the dark triad are quite negative psychological traits and consists of Machiavellianism, which is being manipulative, cynical, using other people to get ahead; narcissism, having extremely high self-regard, also grandiosity and entitlement; and what's called non-clinical psychopathy. And that's the extent to which people tend to callously disregard other people, the rights of other people, and be impulsive. Now, what we found in looking at the individual differences that were related to students' reasons for not cheating was that those reasons that were most endorsed, morality and norms and motivation for learning, were related to self-control and perseverance of effort. Students higher in self-control, so students who could resist temptation and students who tended to persevere, said that they were not cheating because they were motivated to learn, and they were not cheating because they believed it was the right thing to do. Fear of punishment and detection was related to the traits of Machiavellianism and narcissism. Machiavellianism is wanting to do whatever you can strategically to get ahead, even if that involves sort of doing the wrong thing. But people who do that don't want to be exposed as doing the wrong thing. So, of course, they don't want to be detected and don't want to be punished. And, of course, for people who are high in narcissism, again, it would be a blow to their self-esteem to be exposed as having done the wrong thing. So they too were concerned about detection and punishment. Lack of opportunity, so that is, I haven't cheated because I haven't had the chance to cheat, was related to lack of self-control, subclinical, non-clinical psychopathy, and low consistency of interest. So that is the students who are saying, look, I can't, if I had a chance to do something, I probably couldn't stop myself all that easily. I'm not really interested in what I'm doing, but I haven't cheated yet because I haven't had the chance to cheat. So what these results, I think, tell us is that there's some hint here towards the existence of the three groups that I'm arguing exist. That we have the largest, most endorsed reasons for not cheating: morality, norms, motivation for learning, related to self-control and persistence of effort, things that we know make good students. Most of our students in universities are good students who persist, who have a good level of self-control, and that makes a lot of sense. We have some students who might cheat, but they don't because they're worried about being caught or punished. And then we have a smaller group of students, our least endorsed reason for not cheating, but those students tend to have reduced levels of self-control, maybe be a bit more impulsive, and maybe not be quite so interested in what they're doing. Okay, Now that's our psychology criminology study, and it now takes me on to an economics study. Recently, I've collaborated on with Dan Rigby and Kel Tremaine, who was at Western Sydney, is now at University of Technology, Sydney. In this study, we used the method I mentioned previously with Dan Rigby's research of giving students a choice or a set of choices of would you buy an assignment? So students who were coming up to having an assignment due at university were told you could buy an assignment in this upcoming class that you have, and here are the options that you have, and here are the grade, price, risks of being caught, and penalties of being caught associated with those options. So we gave over 300 students 10 scenarios like this. In option 1, they would get or 2, they'd get a high distinction. Option 3, they'd get a distinction. These things had different prices. They had different risks of being caught, different penalties. And through using 10 different iterations of this, we could test against each other all the different prices, grades, risks of being caught, and so on. And also look at whether students chose to buy an assignment at all or not at all. And we asked them a lot of subsequent questions, and I'll get into the answers of those as well in a second. Now, importantly, interestingly, and somewhat comfortingly, 64% of students in this study said that they would never buy an assignment. So they always choose the would not buy option. Less comfortingly, 36% of students said at least one occasion they would buy an assignment that was written by someone else to submit as their own under one of these sets of conditions. Now, we wanted to know whether all the things that we were manipulating in this study, the nuances of different grades, different price, different risk and penalty actually made some kind of difference. So was it that students were just saying, I wouldn't buy anything, or, well, it's just a study, so I'll buy something. Now, it seemed to be that the conditions of what they would benefit, what they would risk actually made a difference to their choices. So yes, the vast majority of students, thankfully, chose never to buy an assignment, but then there were a few who attempted to maybe buy once out of 10 or twice out of 10. We also had 11 students who indicated that on every one of the 10 scenarios they would buy an assignment. We asked them about that subsequently, and of them, 7 of them said, well, this is just a study, it's not real life, so I just said I'd buy something every time. That's not particularly meaningful to us, so we took their data out of the rest of the analysis that we did. So everyone that sort of left in made choices based on the conditions that were presented to them. Now, drilling down into the students who didn't buy assignments, we asked them why not. Again, the vast bulk of them said that they just thought it was the wrong thing to do. In the other free response, a lot of them were saying, well, I'm studying to learn. So the people who weren't buying assignments were primarily doing it because they thought it was immoral. And that's fitting in again with our 3 groups that I talked about earlier. Now, Dan undertook a type of analysis on this data, the data that came out of this study, called latent class modeling. What latent class modeling does is it captures the data and tries to see whether the people in the study fall into distinct groups. And what we found is that we got 3 groups out of this. The 3 groups that we got in the latent class modeling, first of all, 74% of students fell into a group who were mostly insensitive to the price, the marks, the risks, the penalties. And the main predictor of membership of this group was buying none, or never buying an assignment in the choices given to them. Now, you'll notice, if you remember numbers really distinctly, that 64% of students said they would never buy. We've got another 10% that crept into this 3rd class of students, and these students, some of them bought once or twice. Okay, but generally these were students who weren't buying assignments under any circumstances. Our second group of students, 19% of students, were tempted to buy assignments, particularly if it was going to give them better grades. So particularly if they were going to get high distinctions out of buying assignments. But as the risk of detection went up and as the strength of penalty went up, these students were dissuaded from buying. So these students were tempted, were often around about selecting 5 buy, 5 not buy in our study, but they were not buying obligatorily, and they were dissuaded particularly by the risk of detection and then the punishment. Finally, we had 7% of students who pretty much would buy assignments unless it was the highest risk of detection combined with the highest penalty. So these were students who weren't put off by price, they weren't put off by grade, they weren't put off particularly by lower penalties or having some chance of detection. It was only higher penalties and a high chance of detection. And so I think these really do make up our groups of the non-cheaters. As I said, some of them buy, maybe once out of 10. The cheat curious and the likely cheat. Sorry, this keeps forwarding on me inadvertently. What I'd say about my term non-cheaters is that they're not never cheaters. These are students who, at the very extreme, could be tempted, and we still need to do something about that to promote academic integrity, which is something I will get to. Okay, now we added some individual differences to this analysis. We looked at risk aversion, and risk aversion predicted membership of the non-cheater group. So the people who were typically not buying assignments were quite risk averse in their personality. And that personality dimension psychopathy came up again. It predicted membership of the likely cheater group. So the likely cheater group, people who were tending to buy assignments on all occasions, were higher in psychopathy. And the higher people were in psychopathy, the more likely they were to fall into that group. Now, it is an interesting question. Why would students who are high in psychopathy intend to cheat? Because this was just a would you buy an assignment intention kind of question. And why would they not be that worried about being caught or detected in, because they're only really worried if the chance of being caught was very high and the punishment was very high. And that question I've tried to answer a little bit in a couple of the studies that I've led. So I've looked at how and why psychopathy might be related to cheating intentions, and particularly contract cheating intentions. And I believe that it would be related to subjective norms, that is what people think is common, attitudes, that is what people think is the right thing to do, and their expectation that they will feel bad if they do the wrong thing or if they're caught doing the wrong thing. So what we found in the study, that I've got the paper up here, is that psychopathy was related to believing that cheating was more common. Psychopathy was related to believing that cheating was less serious. Psychopathy was related to not expecting to feel bad if you cheated and got away with it. So that's anticipated guilt. And psychopathy was related to expecting to not feel ashamed if you got caught cheating. So all of those things factor into why psychopathy as a personality dimension was related to cheating intentions. Another aspect of personality and individual differences I've looked at is an interesting concept called educational entitlement. Some students think that they should be, I should say, treated like they're special in an educational environment, that teachers should really go out of their way for them, that their learning is not their own responsibility, but it's the responsibility of others. And what I found in another study is that the dark triad traits, which include psychopathy, but also Machiavellianism and narcissism, is related to particularly that externalization of responsibility. Students who have higher levels of these essentially undesirable personality traits tend to put the blame of not learning onto other people rather than accepting the responsibility themselves. And the extent to which they externalize their responsibility predicts their engagement in academic misconduct. So taken together, those previous two studies show that the personality dimension psychopathy is related to not thinking cheating serious, not being worried particularly about the consequences, not thinking other people do it, not really thinking the learning's all your responsibility anyway. And this explains why people who have that high levels of that personality dimension tend to be more likely to engage in various kinds of academic misconduct or cheating. Now, for people who've been paying close attention, you will see that I mentioned there were 2% of students who admitted in Tracy Brettag's big survey to buying assignments and submitting them as their own. And in our economic choice study, we found that 7% of students fell into that likely cheat category of they would often buy assignments unless the penalties were really high. Now, these studies, both Tracy's and our economic choice kind of study, rely on people admitting to potentially doing the wrong thing, or what we would call self-report kinds of data. Now, we know in psychology that self-report data can be something that underestimates the extent to which people will do a bad thing, an undesirable thing, or admit to some kind of sensitive information about themselves. So we could ask the question, is it 2%? Is it 7%? Because it flashed up already, you've seen this. Actually, the group of likely cheats, my guess, is probably more like about 10% of students. Now, the reason I think that is because I've run a study looking at the looking to estimate the prevalence of engagement in commercial contract cheating that used methods that were beyond different to, and in many ways more useful, more reliable than typical self-report methods. This study, moving beyond self-reports to estimate the prevalence of commercial contract cheating, what we did was two things that are particularly helpful to estimating the prevalence of bad behaviour that don't just rely on self-reports. One was we provided a anonymous incentive to be truthful. Now, that takes a fair bit of explaining. I could probably take the time to explain that in questions at the end if people really want to know about that, or I can point you to the paper and the paper that we based this on that explains all that method really well. But the estimation, the incentive to be truthful is one thing, and that was quite helpful. The other thing that we did, though, that is particularly useful is we didn't just use self-reports. We used 3 points of data to estimate the prevalence of commercial contract cheating. One was the truth incentivized self-report. So that is the extent to which people said they did it when they had an incentive to be truthful. The next was asking students to estimate how much their peers cheated as well in the ways that we were talking about. Now, students may not admit to something themselves, but they might know what their fellow students are doing, and they might have a good sense of how much their fellow students are cheating. And then the other thing we asked was how likely students are to admit to cheating if they have cheated in that way. And we divided the self-report by that estimated admission. And that gave us 3 estimates of the prevalence of contract cheating. We looked at 2 kinds of contract cheating, what we called commercial ghostwriting, and that is having bought an assignment specifically written by a commercial ghostwriter, and file sharing, and that is downloading an assignment written by someone else that you've traded for another file and putting your name on it and submitting that as your own. Now, what we did with those 3 estimates of data was then get a mean of those. We use the geometric mean because it accounts better for extremes. And the figure roughly across the different kinds of cheating was, I would say, rule of thumb is about 10% of students engaging in contract cheating. Okay, so I think I've made my case from the previous studies that there are these 3 distinct groups of students. There are the non-cheaters, the students who will typically not cheat most of the time, and they will tend to do so for moral, ethical reasons and reasons of learning. We've got the cheat curious students, the students who might be tempted to cheat, but also will be dissuaded by the risk of getting caught and the penalties. And then we've got the likely cheats, the students who will very often take the opportunity to cheat. It may be about 10% of students who are like this, but serious penalties and high risk of getting caught will dissuade those students from cheating. Now, because we have these three distinct groups, and I've already started to hint towards this, three distinct reactions, I want to get into the reactions, the methods, the things that we can do to promote academic integrity and reduce academic misconduct among these three groups of students. So what do we do for our non-cheaters? So for them, we promote academic integrity. Promoting academic integrity means telling people what the right thing to do is and telling them how to do it. Now, we can't just think that a student coming in might be cheat curious, might be a likely cheater. We have to assume that everyone needs to know how to do their citations. We have to assume that everyone needs to know what academic integrity is. So we promote academic integrity for all students, campus-wide, course-wide, unit-wide, when we're doing this. But how do we do it? In 2013, Tracy Brettag and colleagues published a paper with a nice title, Teach Us How to Do It Properly in Australian Academic Integrity Survey. I really like this because it makes an excellent point in the title, which is that students need to know how to do the right thing in order to do the right thing. What this means very specifically is students need to know what academic integrity rules are, for one, and they need to know how to do citations to avoid plagiarism and to properly indicate an attribute in their work. So teaching students how to do it properly. How do we teach them? Competency and mastery-based training courses work really well. Same year, 2013, I led a study where we looked at implementing a competency-based training course, and we doubled the understanding of plagiarism among students as compared with students who hadn't done the competency-based training. What I've subsequently found in reviewing the literature is that teaching students citation skills is more important than just in general saying, yay, academic integrity is good. You should show academic integrity. You should do the right thing and not cheat. Because when people have the skills to do the right thing, they can do the right thing. It just makes it easier for them. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't promote academic integrity with a bit of a cheer squad, but certainly the skills are highly important. Lots of universities have various kinds of training programs, and then beyond that, often embed them in their units as well. Epigeum have a module for academic integrity you may or may not be familiar with, but lots of these sorts of things exist. You probably already have many yourselves. In addition to that, here's an example of something else you could do in student advocacy. The University of Adelaide have this really nice academic integrity ambassadors program. This is a screenshot from their website. You can go to the website and read all about it. They train students and assist students to be academic integrity ambassadors to other students. Honor codes are very common in the US. Western Sydney is one place in Australia that has an honor code related to academic integrity. Again, this is something that is used as a promotion device. People sign up for as related to the academic integrity policy. And finally, a nice little example from the University of South Australia. Around their campus, last time I was there, they had these posters up. Academic integrity matters, just generally reminding students walking around campus that academic integrity is important, and QR codes where students can point their phones and get more information. So promoting academic integrity is important, and we do it for all students. For the cheat curious students, the students who might cheat but might be dissuaded by the chance of being caught or by barriers being put in their way or by punishments, we need to look at ways that we can prevent cheating. And importantly, we can put barriers in place for cheat-curious students that are not burdens for non-cheaters. Now, I'm going to quickly talk by way of an analogy to this. This is a house that's under construction across from my house, and I walk past this nearly every day when I'm walking my dog. This house has, at the moment, out the front, because this was taken a few days ago, some bricks, some equipment. I think it's like a brick cutting machine and a few other things. And anyone who was interested in stealing it or stealing a brick could walk past and take a brick. Now, for me as a non-stealer, I walk past this every day. The fact that there are bricks there and I could take them doesn't bother me because I was never going to take them. If you think about someone who might, though, there are various things that might just dissuade them, I should say, from taking a brick as they walk past or taking a bit of equipment as they walk past. You could put a fence around this building site. You see building sites with fences around them in lots of places. You could put a security camera there so people know that if they do something, they're going to be seen doing it. That would potentially be enough to dissuade lots of people who would walk past and think, I might take a brick, from not taking a brick from this building site. Now, if we think about this in terms of student assignments, something like Turnitin looks very much like having a fence or a security camera. For the students who are never going to copy out of a textbook and not cite it correctly, or who are never going to copy out of a journal article or a website and not cite it correctly, the existence of Turnitin is not a barrier to them. It's not a burden to them. It's just there. But for the students who might have done that, knowing that that is there, that the text matching software will pick them up if they cheat, they would potentially think twice about it and not do it. And that's all that's necessarily needed, that possibility of detection. In a recent chapter in the new book, Academic Integrity in the Social Sciences, Jo Clare has talked about situational crime prevention theory and its potential applications to academic misconduct and dissuading students from cheating. He provides this table within the book of the different things that situational crime prevention theory from criminology says can be done to make it a little bit harder for people to do the wrong thing in any kind of situation. And he then goes on in the chapter to apply this to stopping students from using fake medical certificates, or what you could do to stop students from using fake medical certificates to get extensions. Now, taking some of the principles of situational crime prevention theory to apply to cheat curious students, we can do a lot of things, and a lot of these things we already do at universities. We make it harder to cheat on something. We make the target more difficult to do the wrong thing on, with using things like identity verified assessments like exams and vivas. We control access to information and to places. We can deflect people from doing the wrong thing by routinely monitoring text matching. We can monitor file sharing sites as well. That's something that fewer universities are doing, but is a really useful thing to do. There's what's called natural surveillance going on anyway. We already have people looking at students' work, like markers, and if we train markers to identify cheating, then we're improving that natural surveillance. We can remove targets for cheating by not reusing previous assignments. We can avoid disputes by making our misconduct information important. We can reduce temptation to cheat by taking marks off formative assignments. And we can set our rules, which we do with our academic integrity policies, and post our instructions visible for everyone. Lots of these things are things that we already do, but we don't necessarily in all instances do all of them or as many of them as we could. And all I'm saying here is that the situational crime prevention model gives us a lot of ideas of what we could think about doing. Finally, what do we do for our likely cheats? What do we do for the students who, unless it's the highest level of penalty and unless it's the highest level of risk, will likely take the chance to cheat? And the answer to that is that we need to enforce the rules when we catch them cheating, because what we're ultimately going for with this group of students is to deter students from doing this, because they know they will be detected and they know that they will get a serious consequence if they do. As Kath Ellis and I have written in a chapter that's currently in production, no amount of educational interventions, honor codes, or integrity awareness campaigns will be sufficient to address the types of serious cheating behaviours that we're talking about with contract cheating and some of the students who engage in it. It's really nice to think if we're great teachers, students just won't cheat in our class. But there are some students who are different from all of the other students who, regardless of how nice we are, how good we are as teachers, may still be tempted to cheat. And they need to know that if they do, they'll be caught doing so. And that then leads to this question of, well, can we catch contract cheating? People have been saying for years, and I said at the start, it doesn't get caught as much as we think it should. It doesn't get caught all that much. We've been able to kind of deny that it's even happening because it doesn't get caught. But again, particularly over the last 5 years, so many methods have been developed that can help us investigate and detect contract cheating. Having dedicated investigators, training academic staff, using technology like Turnitin authorship and assignment watch, and all sorts of other things that are listed on here. And again, I'm happy in questions to talk about any and all of these sorts of things, can be used to detect contract cheating. And really importantly, in the enforcement of rules, we find that students who engage in contract cheating tend to do so repeatedly. So likely cheats tend to be repeat cheats. So penalties for re-engagement and for multiple instances need to be quite serious and strong. Importantly, also, TEXA are here to help. TEXA have developed a contract cheating detection and deterrence masterclass, which is a set of online modules that anyone with an Australian university email address can sign up for and do. There were also some live workshops. I think they may have all run now, or there may not be many left, and there may not be in many places in Australia accessible to everyone. And they may run again in the future, but regardless of that, you can certainly do the online modules at any time, and over 3,000 Australian academics have done these. Now, importantly, I've made the case that you need multiple barriers to prevent contract cheating. These multiple barriers are our education for our students who need education, our engineering, that is our policies, our technology, our enforcement, and in a chapter, Rundle et al. That I worked on, we use the analogy of the Swiss cheese model of accident analysis and prevention. No barrier is perfect. If holes in all of the barriers line up, then cheating might slip through. But in general, the more barriers you have, the better. And this is, again, an important point for there being distinct groups of students who have different needs. We need different things to stop them from cheating or to promote academic integrity with them. Now, just noticed I have a little video there that I need to stop. Sorry. I thought I deleted that one. Okay, I had one pre-recorded version of this. All right. I'm not the only person who's thought about there being different groups of students that need to have different approaches. Kath Ellis and Kane Murdoch have come up with this enforcement pyramid where they say we have small groups of students at the top who will tend to do the wrong thing, for whom you need serious penalties, middling groups of students who might be tempted to cheat but can be dissuaded by assessment security, and then a big group of students at the bottom who will tend not to cheat. Now, I think this pyramid distribution puts more people at the top and in the middle than really exist. I think the real distribution looks more like this. And just to be nerdy, I can tell you that this is a leptokurtic distribution. This is my psychology stats brain speaking. It is a smaller group at the top. But regardless, ultimately what we want to do is ensure academic integrity and reduce academic misconduct. And this means influencing the behaviour of students regardless of their dispositions. Likely cheating students and cheat-curious students, to the extent that these groups exist, doesn't mean that they will cheat or they obligatorily cheat. We can do things to reduce that. Also, non-cheating doesn't mean that they will never cheat. These students need to know how to do the right thing. And so that's important too. And now back to the ChatGPT to round off a little bit. ChatGPT has increased opportunities to cheat in some assignments and sometimes and in some ways. The assessments we have at university have to be reconsidered in general to account for generative AI. But many of the approaches we've previously used to reduce cheating will still work with generative AI. However, some of them won't. The impact of generative AI on the contract cheating industry is an interesting thing. Some students have tried to use generative AI instead of paying someone to write their assignments for them and found that they've been caught having used generative AI and been in trouble for that and have gone back to commercial contract cheating writers. The contract cheating industry is still there, and it's something that we need to be worried about. Detection of AI produced material is tricky, but it's not impossible. And there are methods beyond the AI detector programs that I'd love to be able to talk about at some point as well. But as Jo Claire has argued, and I'll put up, I think I have one more slide, disrupting opportunities using the situational crime prevention ideas is a really good idea in the context of ChatGPT as well. Jo Claire and his PhD student recently published this paper in the International Journal for Educational Integrity on using situational crime prevention ideas to disrupt cheating using ChatGPT. So giving ideas to university administrators and course coordinators on applications of situational crime prevention to both before an assignment happens, when an assignment happens, and after an assignment has happened, where you can reduce students using generative AI to complete parts of their assignment for them in situations where you don't want them using generative AI to complete parts of their assignments for them. Yes, I am fully aware that sometimes it's desirable to be teaching students to use generative AI, and I'm not just saying it's bad, but there are times where we don't want them to use it. And this framework, this paper, which I'd direct people to, is a great way to start to get some ideas of what you can do in that space. So that's it. That's it from me. Thank you so much for your time. I'm happy to take any and all questions that come my way, and I'll pop off my slideshow.
Thank you so much, Guy. Absolutely riveting and fascinating, and so many things to think about. So I'm glad we've recorded it, because I'm sure we'll all want to go back and re-listen, because there are lots of really important things for us to take away. We're now going to move into the question. So, Sheila, you're sharing a slide at the moment, or I don't think you need to share anything. It's best if we don't share right now, because I'm going to use the participant list to see when hands come up and call on people in order of their hands going up.
And Lisa, I saw some things went in the chat, but I don't know whether they're questions.
They did, and they were answered by our peers, so that was really good. So if you have a question or a comment, please put your hand up and I'll call on you. Thanks very much. There was an early question, since I don't see anyone with a hand yet. Oh, we've got a hand. Caroline, go.
Oh, you're muted, Caroline. Could I unmute you?
Caroline, can one of the administrators unmute Caroline? I can.
There we go.
There we go. On you go.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, there was some lot. Thank you guys so much. I was trying to hold back because I always ask you questions, but it was a great presentation. Thank you so much. A couple of things. I'm very interested about that overlay of student mental health on this, because you said obviously you've got students who wouldn't normally consider it, but if you think of all the complexity of, you know, stress and mental health, poor mental health, that presumably might tip somebody into a different space. And then my other point is about staff well-being. So I'm thinking of that group that you talked about, particularly that what sort of entitled expectations, and how I'm in allied health, and I know there are certain areas in health where it's probably, you know, the high stakes programs where students, you know, fight to get into them and then perhaps have expectations of entitlement, and the drain that puts on staff, dealing with a very small proportion of students, perhaps then, who are more likely to do the wrong thing. So yeah, a couple of observations. Thank you.
Yeah, although there's observations there, I actually can point to some I'd make a little comment on that. I've actually, I've been doing too much of this. I've actually published a couple of papers showing connections between negative emotionality, so anxiety, stress, depression, and engagement in academic misconduct. What we found is that being when people experience, students experience anxiety, depression, and stress, that predicts their attitudes towards cheating. That if they're feeling that way, they just think cheating is more acceptable. What that flows onto is increased intentions to cheat and also increased cheating behaviour. We've got that data as well. Even when it's not influencing their thinking process, even when they're not going, I feel really bad and therefore I just think it'll be okay to cheat. There's a direct relationship of, if I feel bad, I will cheat, because everything just goes out the window when you're under a whole pile of stress. So yes, that relationship exists. We can, as university academics, do some things to reduce the burden of student stress around assignments, such as trying to make sure that they don't all happen at the same time and that they're not all heavily weighted and these sorts of things. That is, as much as we can do in that kind of design space. And of course, we can be supportive and we can have our programs and our support systems and everything else that exists for students. But certainly, yeah, that is a problem, and we can't control everything in students' lives. So those sorts of things do happen as well. On the entitlement thing, yeah, it was really interesting. I came across the entitlement idea at a paper where they had argued that the current generation of students are more entitled than previous generations of students, and that this should be related to increased academic misconduct. And then, having made that argument in the paper, they collected data and they found that academic misconduct was in fact lower in the more recent generation of students than the students that they had surveyed in the past. So it's not everything, but it doesn't mean that entitlement issue is not there. And it doesn't mean that it's not related to academic misconduct. It just means that they were wrong at kind of generalizing about whole generations of students in the paper that I'd found. So the entitlement issue is an interesting one, and the best solutions that I know to it are essentially just setting expectations as much as you can upfront, so that people know what it is that they can expect to get from their academics, and the staff, and from the university, and what is expected to be them and their own work and their own doing. Beyond that, some people will still hold entitled expectations, but that is the best that we can do to counter them.
Thanks, Caroline. Thanks, Guy. We have a question just before I go to you, Tanmoy. There's a question in the chat. It was from Louise. Grit can be nurtured and promoted according to this discussion. So potentially, could we move some of the students from the middle of the pyramid to the bottom, or is this wishful thinking?
I think we can move students from the middle of the pyramid to the bottom in their behaviours. I don't necessarily know in their dispositions, but in their behaviours, we can make curious students non-cheaters by making it the conditions such that they probably won't cheat. But it's sort of harder to change that sort of potential interests that they might have. But regardless, grit as a concept, it's been argued that the growth mindset idea, Carol Dweck's work in psychology, that you promote trying and you promote people thinking that they can always get better and they can always develop, can be helpful in fostering grit. The work on grit is by an American academic in particular named Angela Duckworth. There is a book that she wrote called Grit. If anyone is really interested in that topic, I'd certainly say go check that out. She's got heaps of online information as well. It's a really interesting kind of idea, and the original kind of spark for it in psychology research was showing that grit was more predictive of university success than IQ in a large study. So really interesting topic. Yeah.
And this makes me think, though, that we don't want to have a generally punitive culture, because that's not going to happen. There needs to be more of an educative, positive culture. So that's really helpful. Thanks, Guy. Tanmoy, over to you. Tanmoy, your question was, do you think that offline exams would reduce cheating? Is that your question?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the presentation. So, Professor Guy, I am an academic in computing, and now we have all or most of our exams online. So do you think like switching back to the olden days, like going back to the offline exams would reduce cheating to a certain extent? Thank you.
It depends on what you consider to be cheating. Okay, if you consider essentially, having access to information, like being able to Google the answer to a question cheating, then absolutely, because we sometimes set up online tests where we say to students, we expect you to not look up the answers. We expect you to just answer the questions in front of you, and we even try to manipulate the conditions of those by making them really short time, by having random answers, and all these sorts of things. With generative AI, students can have other things answer those questions for them, and if you consider that cheating, if that's against the rules that you set, well, you've got no hope of stopping them in an unsupervised online assessment. Certainly one set of results I've got access to that I yet to publish and been trying to get time to write up. It's around about over 3/4 of students who say that they have Googled answers in an online test when they weren't supposed to. Certainly that's an issue. Identity verified invigilated assessment is a high security assessment. I think there's a really nice distinction in the academic integrity, academic misconduct literature between academic integrity of asking students to do the right thing and promoting the culture of being moral and all that kind of stuff, and this idea of assessment security that Phil Dawson, actually probably sitting here on my desk, assessment security, okay, defending digital assessment in the defending assessment security in the digital world. The idea that some assignments, some kinds of assessment are more cheatable than others, but beyond the kind of cheatability, assessment security also means that in some kinds of assessments, it's more easy to detect when cheating has gone on. So the assessment security doesn't necessarily stop cheating from happening, but it means that the cheating is detectable. If we think about an online exam versus a in-person invigilated exam, cheating is still possible in both instances. Cheating is more detectable when someone is in the room looking at whether a student is looking at notes or opening web pages that they're not supposed to, or glancing at their smartwatch, or whatever else it is that that is against your rules of the exam. So yes, I think invigilated exams are a higher security form of assessment. If that's what you need to prevent the kinds of cheating that you're concerned about, then yes, they are a good thing in that instance. Having said that, exams should not be the be-all and end-all of assessment for a lot of reasons. There's lots of things that we want to train students to do. We want to train students to do long kinds of learning that lead to outputs that take them a while to produce, that are often more authentic and more like what they do in their job. There's not a lot of us who take exams in our real job or as part of our daily work life, but there are a lot of professions where people need to know information on the spot without having to Google it as well. You wouldn't want your emergency room doctor to be looking at you bleeding and go, oh, I've got to just go look up how to deal with this. You want them to know. So there are times when the form of assessment is nice and compatible with the workplace. There's times when the form of assessment security is nice within your overall program of assessment in a course, where you can say, we have some distinct identity verified assessment at key points in time that we can be sure it's our students who do them. We can be sure our students have particular knowledge and of meeting particular learning outcomes. But there's really good arguments for doing other kinds of assessment as well.
Thanks, Guy.
In many things.
Thanks. Let's go on to Erin. Erin Rose.
Oh, you'll need to oh, there we
You're
go.
unmuted.
Great.
Yep.
So thanks for coming along. That's all really interesting. I just had 2 questions. I'll start with the one that I put in the chat, which was, is requesting that students complete their assessments with track changes turned on when, you know, developing an essay or a written assessment. Is that a way that could combat contract cheating or the use of generative AI?
Yes, that would work. That's kind of like a, lack of a better term, jerry-rigged backyard method of doing what some other programs actually do, like Google Docs, which will keep all your previous versions, or using things like OneDoc, I think OneDrive does similar things, and then specific education environment developed programs like Cadmus, again, do similar things where students write within that platform and you can see the progression of their writing over time. One of the things that I've seen done with Cadmus as an example in a unit was a academic showed me that a student had pasted in output that they'd got from ChatGPT, and then that student went about fact checking all of that information, taking out the bits that were wrong, rewriting, putting in bits of information that were right. What they had essentially used ChatGPT for in that instance was like a Google search to give them a bit of a starting idea, but then they had done all this work themselves, and that you know, that's a reasonable academic practice, and because Cadmus was able to kind of replay the assignment, they could see it in that way. Yeah, track changes will show you stuff in a document. Something else that exists in the world is the ability to digitally decompose Word documents into their XML data that allows you to see when things were copied and pasted versus when things were kind of authentically written. Because anytime you type and then delete, or anytime you type and then autosave, it saves a code in the XML data of a Word document called an RSID code. And you can actually look at all of those. I have a little program that does that for me, which I've had some computer science students develop, and it's super fun. But yeah.
If Lachlan Brown is here as well, I know we were both experimenting with the XML code and examining the XML code to see how students are developing their assessments back in session 1 when ChatGPT was really popular. My other question was, are you finding, or have you heard about other academics experiencing students responding to emails about academic integrity issues with ChatGPT responses?
I haven't heard that, but it wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, and to a certain extent, I would say, so what? Like, an email you write back to an academic isn't subject to the rules of, you know, plagiarism and stuff like that. If students are finding nice efficiencies in writing their emails to academics and we use the same efficiencies right back at them, that's okay. But yeah, that is some interesting.
I had one instance of that earlier in the session, and I was like, I'm not sure about how to address that one, because yeah, technically that's not an assessment. But and I've also heard that it's happening quite frequently, and the responses are obviously very similar because it's drawing from the same database.
Yeah, and even Microsoft Word, Office 365 now, you get prompted replies that you can put into emails that you can just click and send. So we have programs that are starting to do some of these things for us. Beyond that, though, we also know from contract cheating cases that often the students who are caught contract cheating also get their contract cheating writers to write the responses to the academic misconduct allegations. So yeah.
Thanks very much, Erin. Thanks, Guy. I think we're going to go to Murray Rose, and then Karina Kerr has a question from the chat. Murray.
see if I can.
Hi, Guy. Firstly, I want to say thank you. Great presentation. I had a bit of a question, I guess, following on from Erin's idea. I've come from a high school teaching background, and you talked about that change in sense of entitlement. Have you done much research around, I guess, that kind of grey area in the line? I just want to throw a bit of an example. So in the past, I had a student present an assignment. Their sister had actually done the drawing on their poster for their presentation, but the poster technically wasn't marked in the marking criteria. So that was their argument around the fact that they hadn't done anything wrong because there was no marks allocated to that. So some of those kind of grey areas, and are we, being super clear to students what they can and can't do with ChatGPT and where they are crossing, the line of, and when are they cheating versus when they think they're not cheating and they're accidentally crossing that line?
Yeah, that's a really great point. The what is cheating? As I was saying to Tanmoy earlier, it's a matter of do you consider something a breach of the rules? Like how are your rules defined? We took some time at the start of this year, end of last year, to write a bit about generative AI into the academic integrity policy here at University of Western Australia, and I'm sure most other universities around Australia have done that because Australian universities are kind of on top of it. But actually, interestingly, around the world, a few months ago, there was a survey showing that something like 80% of higher education institutions around the world had nothing in policy about generative AI, right? Now, what I find with policy in the academic integrity space is that we often need to tweak much more regularly than we need to tweak things like assessment policy because new things come up. So translation software, for example, is one that's come up with us recently of under what circumstances is it permissible and not permissible to use automated translation in assessment. And we've had to look at redefining, rewriting our rules around that. So your question, of a situation like the one you've encountered with a sister having done a part of an assignment that's not a marked part of an assignment. Yeah, if you don't have a rule, that's actually a prompt really that you might want to rule. You can amongst your colleagues talk about what that rule should be. And I think that's where we go with it. I had an instance here I think is reasonable to talk about in general terms, although there's some confidentiality involved, of a student engaging in academic misconduct in a way that didn't fit within our policy, but it was really quite serious, but our policy wouldn't allow us to in any way deliver the kind of appropriate consequences for that very serious academic misconduct. We rewrote our policy as a consequence of that instance. Yeah, so often policies exist because of single instances of stuff. Now I'm going to point Lisa back to our time at Murdoch University. Murdoch University had something that I felt was really unique in assessment policy that I'd never seen in any other university, which was this thing called conscientious objection to assessment, right? And basically there was this clause in the policy that you could conscientiously object to an assessment if you're a student and not do it. And apparently, when I dug into this, it existed from something like 40 years ago where one student in one unit in vet or something had objected to some kind of dissection thing.
Let's just say it was in a university established in the 70s. It was a little bit alternative and hippie. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and so, one instance goes into a policy and then may sit there forever and people forget why it was there, but that can happen and that might need to happen in cases like the one you're talking about where there's a grey area that your policy doesn't cover.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Murray. Guy, a couple of questions from the chat. I'm happy for the folks to ask their own questions, but I'll just read a few. Kashila had asked, can students move between the three groups based on circumstance or context?
Yeah, I would think so. So essentially the likely cheat students, the students who are not dissuaded by anything except serious consequences, serious penalties. They seem to be, in many cases, not that interested in their topic, but they're trying to get a qualification. Look, some of the instances of students who are like that might be students who were forced into doing a course or felt that they were forced into doing a course by limited choices available to them or by their parents or something like that, where they're not studying what they want to be studying, where they might really be dedicated, engaged students who wouldn't cheat and really want to learn if they were doing what they're interested in. So even with that example, I think students can move between categories, even from the most to the least serious kinds of groups.
Thank you. Karina has, do you want me to, I'll just read it out, Karina, or would you like, yeah, okay. Do you think the implementation of a trauma-informed pedagogy might assist in the risk mitigation of cheating?
I'm not that familiar with trauma-informed pedagogy, I'll have to admit. One of the things we're looking at University of Western Australia at the moment is the cultural safety and academic integrity, particularly for Indigenous students. So we're looking at whether our academic integrity policy fits with Indigenous students, and there's obviously a lot of trauma in the cultures there, things like the stolen generation and so on. So there's things to consider there, but it's not something I think I have a good enough handle on to sensibly comment about.
Thanks very much. Kashila, you've got another question there. Did you want to ask it?
Thank you, Lisa. Guy, thank you for that fabulous presentation. I guess my reflection was that given nearly 90% of students fall into that category of non-cheaters and cheat curious, so that's the majority, my question was, what are your thoughts about where we as individuals or institutions invest or concentrate our efforts? Like, what's the return on investment?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because it's one of those things of how do we strategically deploy our limited resources in the best possible way. And the students who engage in contract cheating in particular does take a lot of work and a lot of effort and a lot of dedication to catch and to go through processes, procedurally fair processes of natural justice to bring these through to an instance where the case has been substantiated and survives appeal. Okay, that's a lot of work, and it's a resource intensive work. Now, there are a few good ideas on how to do that more efficiently. The Courageous Conversations model from the University of New South Wales is one that's really well worth looking at as one of those things. But even so, it does take that effort. Now, we are not just constrained by what we would most like to do in the world, but also by things like our regulator TEXA. TEXA are interested in academic integrity being upheld at universities. They have a number of rules in the Higher Education Standards Framework that we all have to meet. And TEXA are aware of what universities around Australia are doing in this space, and they are aware that some universities are really good at detecting contract cheating and putting resources into it. Now, that might sound like, well, we should put those resources in to meet our TEXA obligations. If we want to be brutal bottom line about this, which we can sometimes, what the universities that are doing a good job of detecting contract cheating are actually finding is when they detect it early, so students in their first or second semester in particular, and the consequence for engaging in contract cheating is failure of a unit, those students tend to come back and repeat the unit that they have failed. As a consequence, they pay for the unit twice. Now, this is not to say this should be a revenue-raising measure for universities. Ideally, what this should do is universities publicising, yes, we are detecting it, students talking to each other, yes, we are detecting, we are being detected, and I had to repeat it because I cheated the first time. So that dissuades other students. It gets the message out to the students who might cheat that yes, they're going to get caught. But it actually shouldn't be too much of a revenue imposition. It could in fact be revenue neutral or revenue positive to enforce the rules around preventing cheating. So I think we do need to invest in stopping the serious cheaters, because there's a huge reputational issue among that. There's the TEXA issue, and actually the cost is not quite what we think it is. But then at the lower level, that just teaching students how to reference properly. I was my school's academic integrity officer, had to investigate cases. We had over 1,600 students in first year psychology here a couple of years ago. In one semester, I had meetings with 20 students, which were all really just inappropriate referencing, but the more egregious ones in that space. And had those students been taught better about citation practices earlier on before their assessment went in, I probably would have seen half of that number. That would have saved me time, that would have saved Marcus time, that would have saved other people time. So putting in the work at the front end tends to save us time and resources at the back end. So it's worth just doing what we can across the board.
Thank you very much, Guy. We've run out of time for questions. There's some really amazing questions and comments and discussion in the chat. So I thanks everyone for that. Guy, I'd like to thank you so much for your informative and interesting, very, very interesting keynote. It's obviously on topic, it's on our minds, and you provided a lot of information, a lot of things that we might need to consider going forward. But I also thank everyone very much for coming along and asking great questions and engaging in the chat. Before we go, we're going to get Tiff or Sheila to put the survey. It's already there. I should have known because Sheila's already done.
We'll just put it in.
The survey for feedback. If you could all please complete that. It is absolutely vital that we get feedback, and we thank you all very, very much for coming along. We've got a few minutes before we start our next session, which is the LMS Masterclass, showcasing our move to Brightspace, Guy. So we're moving from Blackboard, or Interact 2, I think it's Blackboard, is it, to Brightspace. Anyway, that's our next session. Guy, thank you very, very much. You've got lots of love and thanks coming for you in the chat.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks everyone for your time. Thanks for listening to me. And sort of as a academic integrity researcher, if anyone's sort of interested in that stuff and wants to do something, I'm always happy to collaborate and work with people. So just I'm over here in Perth.
Thank you, and thanks for starting at 6:30 this morning in Perth. Thank you very much.
No worries. Okay, see ya. Bye.
Thanks everyone. Please jump onto the survey. I really appreciate it. Thank you.